Yes, please. Oh, thank you. How was your night?
Good.
Did you take a pill?
No.
No, that's
I
good.
went through till I woke before.
Good morning, everyone. Could I be behind not listening, or the meeting has not yet started?
Good morning.
Great. I was worried that possibly the meeting is ongoing and my sound system is not working.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome for this meeting. My name is Luere John, and I will do much of the moderating for the meeting today. Thank you very much. We shall be starting the next 5 minutes.
Thank you, Bosco.
Peter, do you have sound?
Yes, I do. Thanks.
Okay, good.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, once again, let me take this opportunity to welcome you to this meeting and thank you for taking time to be with us this morning. We shall do our best to stick within the time, the 2 hours we've requested for, because we know that everybody is quite busy, being that it's in the middle of the week. Our program will run as already provided. We shall have a prayer, and then I think we'll have a quick introduction just to know who is with us today. So the introduction will be just the name and organization, so that we can get through that quickly. Then we'll have opening remarks from the ED of Uganda Export Promotion Board, which will be followed by a quick brief on the project, the overall project under which this activity is falling. Thereafter, we'll then invite our consultant, Mr. William Babigumira, to give us a presentation of the report and his findings so far. Then we'll take up to 30 minutes for questions, answers, and discussions. Then thereafter, we shall close. So we expect all this to be within 2 hours. So that's the time we set for ourselves. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so to start us off, let me request Madame Brenda Opus to give us a short prayer, then we'll get into the introduction. So Madame Brenda, please go ahead. Madame Brenda, it seems you're still unmute. You're still mute. Mute. Hello? Okay. So sorry, we have a small glitch. She's unable to, she just has a small problem. Just give us a few minutes.
Good morning to you all. I hope you can all hear me. I'm Brenda Opus, and I'll take the opportunity to lead the prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time. We pray that as we deliberate, Lord Jesus, we may come up with successful resolutions and be able to link the businesses of Korea and Uganda. In your mighty name I pray. Amen.
Okay, so thank you very much, Brenda, for that quick prayer. For just to be able to know who is with us today, I would request that each of one quickly you give us a name and then the organization or company you're working for. So I'll start with Peter.
Good morning, Peter Ginsberg. I'm the Managing Director of the Aiden Consultants Group. We are international trade advisors and consultants, and we're in partnership with the IRC group in Korea, who are handling this on behalf of the group. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. Bridget? Hello, Bridget, are you there? Okay, I'll move on to Peter Underwood, please.
Good morning. Good morning. It's my honor to meet all of you. I'm the Managing Director of IRC Consulting. We are implementing the Korea portion of this project, and we're very honored to be partnering with you on this project. And I'm here with my colleague, Dave Yoon. Dave, maybe you could introduce yourself too, please. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Yoon. I'm a senior consultant at IRC. I'm working with Peter at IRC in Korea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Bridget, you there now?
Yes, I'm there. My name is Bridget Mucha, Director Swift,
Okay.
Swift World Uganda. Happy to be here.
Okay, thank you, Bridget. William? Yes, go ahead, William.
Hi, good morning. My name is William Babigumira. I am a certified trade advisor, and I am the consultant who has conducted the export potential assessment for this assignment. So I'll be speaking to you for the better half of this workshop. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. David?
Yes, good morning, colleagues from Export Promotion Board. My name is David Livingston Ebiru, the Acting Executive Director, Uganda National Bureau of Standards. We are very much interested that as we export good stuff, which meet market requirements. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. David. Prakash, Mr. Prakash, are you there?
Hi, good morning to everyone. My name is Prakashan. I represent Lake Perch Limited. We do export, process and export fish, lake perch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Prakash. Then let me go to Mr. Godfrey Bogere.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bogere Godfrey. I work with Sulma Foods Limited. We are exporters of fruits and vegetables, and we are also processors in Uganda.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Makode? Hello, Makode?
Please.
Hello, we can't hear you.
Urgent, I'm in a meeting. Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I've just got into the meeting, so I've not been following up. So
just a quick introduction, Mr. Makode.
Yes. My name is Makode Christopher. I'm Managing Director of Mega Holdings. We export seeds to South Korea, mainly Sim and soya beans.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Makode. This is Kakande. Are you there?
Yes. Morning to you all. My name is Kakande Stura. I work with Global Necessities Limited. It's a company trying to export into fresh, and vegetable exports.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kakande. Godfrey Kaseje. Hello, Godfrey, you there? Okay, can I move on to Rebecca? Rebecca? Okay, then Mr. Lawino Bosco.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca Nanjala. Yes, are you hearing me?
Yes, Rebecca, we can hear you. Okay. Okay, as Rebecca sorts out that issue, Mr. Lawino, we can see you. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone.
Yes, please.
Yeah, my name is Bosco Lawino, and I'm the CEO of Tropical Trade International Company Limited. We do export cocoa and vanilla.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Lawino. So can Michael Bagea, are you there?
Yes, hello. Good
Yes,
morning.
please.
I'm called Michael Bagea, and with Frank Team and Company Associates, we consult business consultants, and we help companies marketing their products across the world.
Thank you. Robin, are you there? Okay. Hello, Robin, are you there? Okay, I'll move on. Mrs. Tushabe Hasfa, are you there? Hasfa?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tushabe Hasfa, coordinator for Uganda Fruits and Vegetables Exporters and Producers Association.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Korish, are you there? Okay, so I'll be moving a bit fast. Stella? Mrs. Stella? Okay. Susan?
Hello, everyone. My name is Susan Nejang. I work with Onka Planta Uganda Limited, processors of shea butter. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Simon Rukina, are you there? Simon? Okay. So I'll move on to Mrs. Flores Nachito. Flores,
Yeah, my
are you
name
there?
is Flora. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Florence Nachito, National Coordinator, Horticulture Exporters Association, Uganda Limited, Hotexa.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Brenda, I think you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself. Okay, and lastly, allow me to invite Mr. Lawrence Michael Kecho, who will also be representing the ED in this meeting, to introduce himself and then give us the opening remarks so that we can move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you very much once again, and welcome to all the members present. I am called Okecho Lawrence Michael, the Director of Trade Information at Uganda Export Promotion Board, representing the Executive Director in this meeting. JB, do I proceed with making the remarks or?
No, please proceed with the remarks. We shall get the others to introduce as we go on.
All right. Allow me at this material time welcome everybody and thank you for sparing your time to attend this very, very important meeting. As I said earlier, I am called Okecho Lawrence Michael, the Director of Trade Information, representing the Executive Director, Uganda Export Promotion Board. I would like to allow you to note the following. One, Uganda Export Promotion Board is the national agency mandated to coordinate the development and promotion of Uganda's exports, and that is basically what we are doing now. UEPB's work is guided by the National Development Plan and the National Export Development Strategy, which are key documents that guide us in what we do. The National Export Development Strategy prioritizes increasing Uganda's exports to preferential markets, to preferential market access as key to driving Uganda export growth over the medium term. Uganda's merchandise exports grew by 12% from $3.6 billion in 2018 to $4.095 billion in 2019. Now, preferential markets account for almost 90% of Uganda's export revenue. For example, the top 18 export destinations for Uganda in 2018 were all preferential markets, and these accounted for 82% of the country's foreign merchandise exports, revenue in the last calendar year. However, Uganda's import bill is also growing and surpasses the $6 billion mark in 2018. In 2019, the import bill totaled $6.85 billion. Notably, apart from United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Indonesia, and Malaysia, the top 20 supplying markets for Uganda's imports are all preferential markets. It is therefore very important for Uganda to improve its terms of trade with these preferential markets. Now, the aforementioned trend is not any different in view of Uganda's trade with the Republic of Korea, one of Uganda's 52 preferential markets. Uganda's trade deficit with respect to this market stands at approximately $50 million. In 2019, Uganda exported merchandise worth $0.45 million to this 478 billion market, that is South Korea. And this was principally from coffee, hides and skins, and grains. Yet it is a market for a number of other products, including textiles, bananas, hides and skins, flowers, edible fats and oils, to mention but a few. Now, as the country focuses on the regional market of East African Community, COMESA, and the African Continental Free Trade Area, it is also important not to forget that farm markets such as South Korea are important. Now, this offer opportunities not only for trade, but also knowledge and technology transfer, foreign direct investment, among others. This motivated the partnership between Uganda Export Promotion Board, OFEC, and the African Development Bank to increase and diversify Uganda's trade with South Korea. Now, the project will focus on helping Ugandan exporters, especially micro, small, and medium enterprises, in the South Korea market and building the capacity of trade and business support providers to promote and facilitate exports to this market. I would like to thank the African Development Bank for considering and accepting to partner with us on this project. I would also like to particularly recognize the support of MS Oling, Vera, and Mr. Peter Rasmussen for the support provided to Uganda Export Promotion Board in the preliminary stages of this project. We are working to strengthen this relationship with the African Development Bank and its partners. And on this note, allow me once again thank everybody and wish you all a very fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Okecho, for that and for those remarks. So without further ado, now I think we'll get into the business of the day. And I will start by giving a brief on the project, what the project is all about. William, just a minute, please. Okay, so we'll start by giving a quick brief of what the overriding framework, the project is all about. Then after that, William will go into the report, the in-depth of the report. Now, quickly for the members who are for those of us who are interfacing with the whole initiative or project for the first time, the project is called the Market Links Korea project. So ideally, it is a partnership between UEPB and the Korea Economic Cooperation Trust Fund, which is administered through the African Development Bank. And the overriding objective of the whole initiative is to increase and diversify Uganda's exports to the South Korea market. Now, it's called Market Links because Market Links is an initiative that was started some time ago by UPB, supported by the Irish Aid. And the first phase of this focused mostly on the regional markets of Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and DR Congo. So when we saw an opportunity with the Korea Economic Trust Fund, we presented the same idea, and thanks to everybody who supported us, it was approved and supported. Now, as I said, the goal of the whole initiative was really to increase and diversify Uganda's exports to South Korea, which at the moment are about 90% coffee only. Now, this goal is in line with the National Export Strategy recommendations, which recommendations prioritize efforts to grow and diversify Uganda's exports to the preferential markets, where we have quota-free and duty-free access. So they are about 52 in number, and South Korea is one of those markets. Now, if you look at our trade with South Korea, as noted by Mr. Okecho, is over the last 5 years, it's been less than $1 million. And much of this revenue has been from coffee alone. The imports, on the other hand, have also been dwindling a bit, as you can see in the graph presented. And the trade balance is somewhere between 20 and 50 million, has been between 20 and 50 million over the period. So through this initiative, what we are thinking of doing is, one, to undertake an export potential assessment study. And through the study, what we're really looking at is to evaluate Uganda's export potential with respect to the South Korea market. And that is the report we are going to be looking at today. The number two, after this study, we shall be undertaking another in-market study where we shall be looking at establishing the market and buyer requirements, competition and market trends, growth and diversification opportunities, plus a number of other things. Okay, so all this again is in respect to the trade between Uganda and South Korea. Now we expect that the first study will identify the products that we can focus on as Uganda for that market. And that is the product list that will guide the study in number two. Number three, again, under this initiative, we expect to come up with a market entry strategy. Some kind of guide that government and the private sector can use to enter and compete in this market. The number four, under the initiative, and I think we shall also be looking at, is how we link Ugandan exporters directly to identified buyers in the South Korea market. And lastly, under this initiative, we shall also seek to establish working relations with business support organizations and trade support institutions, both public and private, in South Korea, with which UPB and other partner agencies in the trade facilitation area can exchange information with, can work with to sustain market linkages, or can use to facilitate knowledge and technology transfer between firms in Uganda and Korea. Now, three other things that we shall also be looking at under this project are creating awareness about the identified opportunities in South Korea and what requirements we need to meet to be able to access those opportunities. Two, we shall also be preparing and supporting exporters to access the South Korea market. And then we shall also be running a few activities to promote Ugandan products in this market. So briefly, our program is expected to run from September. Actually, it started much earlier than September, but for now, we shall look at it from September to May next year. So we expect that, from September to November, we've mainly been working on the export potential assessment study. And the draft report, which William will be presenting today, is the output of that particular activity. Then between December and February, we expect to be working on the in-market study. Then in February, we shall have a very short market visit, which will focus on, one, doing some scoping activities, two, initiating relations between the targeted BSOs and TSI partners, and then three, meetings between competent authorities in Uganda, representatives from Uganda and Korea, and discuss things that are pertinent for us to develop trade between the two countries. Then between January and March, what we'll really be doing is to prepare the enterprises. It will all start with an export readiness assessment, of course, of the enterprises in the sectors that we believe have potential for that market. We'll also be conducting some market trials and testing, and then we'll also be finalizing the market entry strategy, which will then advise the sales mission and promotional activities, which we expect to conduct in April 2021, between April and May 2021. Then as noted, sorry, somebody's mic is not on mute, please do that. As noted, some of the key outputs of the project will include the market profile and the buyer profiles, the market entry strategy, MOUs, that is established working relationships between UPB and BSOs and TSIs in South Korea, plus a number of export firms which will be prepared and then linked to potential buyers in South Korea. So ladies and gentlemen, briefly, that is what the project is all about. So I'll now invite Mr. William Babigumira to take us into the report of the Export Potential Assessment Study. Then we'll have a discussion on everything at once. Thank you very much. I invite Mr. Babigumira to proceed.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me very well. Thank you very much, JB, and also the representative of the CEO of Uganda Export Promotion Board for the opening remarks and for carefully explaining what this project is about. So my job was to conduct an export potential assessment for Uganda with South Korea. And now, JB, I don't know whether you were able to circulate the report to the participants in advance, but I have to put a caveat that this is a very toned down version. It's a very brief version of what's the detail that's available in that report. And so you will forgive me that I may not, the slides basically do justice to this subject, but the report is much more granular, it's much more detailed. And I would encourage that Uganda Export Promotion Board share it, as much as possible with this, but with the exporting community and also the experts who are in this webinar. So the structure is such that we conducted a situation analysis. Then we went to look at the export potential and basically carried out an assessment, including a sector profiling exercise, after which we delved into what we call opportunity mapping, and then concluded with the market entry strategy. So that's the essential structure of the export potential assessment. So this is how we went about it. We attempted, first of all, to link the current structure of Uganda's exporting firms with the export potential. And we did that by, trying to assess on the firm side, on the company side, what capabilities exist or do not exist that would help Ugandan exporters to succeed. And we administered a questionnaire over a period of 3 months, but sadly the response rate was actually quite low. Only a small cross-section of these companies that responded actually export to South Korea, okay? But in the main report, we also devised ways and means of offsetting the low response rate And so I'll speak a little bit about it in detail later on. We then looked at the revealed comparative advantage. This is basically to assess the relative advantage or lack thereof of Uganda's products in the export space compared to competing producers and exporters, but mainly focusing on South Korea. We also looked at what's called the export potential. And here we used International Trade Center's export potential assessment tool. It's an online tool. And basically it tells us what the export potential is and also the product diversification potential is, okay? We then run into priority sector selection. Well, based upon the outputs from the RCA and EPI and PDI assessment, and went ahead to basically do a brief profiling of what we think are the priority sectors as revealed by the assessment. The TORs told us to also look at some case studies, and thankfully the case studies really help to offset the limitation that I spoke about, because then we were able to speak to companies that actually export to South Korea. We spoke to 3 companies, one doing coffee, the other one doing flour cuttings, and another one doing beans and spices. We also interviewed some key informants from the Ministry of Trade and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We spoke to the Korean Embassy and also a Ugandan Foreign Service officer based in South Korea, and also the Secretary of the Uganda South Korea Business Association. So basically the inputs from to the case studies and also key informants were instrumental in piecing together a picture of the current situation as regards export potential to South Korea. And then finally, we do what's called a cage comparator analysis, because the TORs said that we could basically step a lot more into the supply side, but also look a little bit more on the demand side. And for that to happen, the cage, which stands for cultural, administrative, geographical, and economic distance comparator, was very useful, because then it would help us to augment, sort of combine all of the assessments that we had done before, the technical assessments, including the revealed comparative, the EPI and PDI. And as we see, the cage comparator really is the handoff. It's a handshake that we are doing with the next phase of this assignment, which is going to be conducted by the consultants who will be working on the market side. So very quickly, the situation really is something that is spoken to in detail in the report, but I think JB and the director at UAPB already spoke to the fact that, you know, our aggregate exports to South Korea are really dismal. They're small, and mainly it's coffee and followed by flowers, or what we call flour cuttings. Well, Uganda's imports from South Korea, like this showed, had a bit dwindling over time, but they've averaged about $42 million. And, you know, we're importing mainly pharmaceuticals, chemicals, plastics, iron and steel, and machinery from South Korea. So now, what's the story behind exports to South Korea from Uganda? It's been an interesting story when we looked at the export basket and how it has evolved over time. Over the period 2005 to 2018, the rise of coffee exports, you know, was accompanied by a decline of other agricultural goods. So that's what we can tell from this export statistics. In 2005, we used to export a lot of tobacco. It's about $2.2 million, you know. In 2013, you can see that tobacco is knocked off the top and coffee comes into the story. And then in 2018, you know, coffee now is the dominant, followed by just a few very small, you know, export items, crude vegetable materials. Tobacco is still going, but very very small quantities. And so fish and tobacco that were once competitive eventually left the export basket since 2010 for the last 10 years. In sharp contrast, cereals, coffee, crude vegetables have since entered into the competitive product mix. And you know, what we found striking was that we've never actually exceeded $5 million exports to South Korea, you know. Instead, what has happened is that there's been a concentration of coffee in the export basket. So about 84%. In fact, JB put it at a much higher figure. It's about 90% export. Contribution to the $5 million is coffee. So what explains this? Well, I mean, good things are happening with Uganda's coffee across the board. So it shouldn't surprise us that coffee is enjoying diverse market access across the world. Ugandan coffee, premium coffee and not so premium coffee, okay? But at the same time, that trajectory with South Korea is also explained by the decline of competitiveness of tobacco, fish, and hides and skins. Well, of course, other factors could have played into this decline, but then what is really important for policymakers and for UAPB is to understand that that decline has been persistent. So it's not trivial. So the story of South Korea also includes, like JB had said, duty-free, quota-free access. And basically, South Korea has offered generous, access, conditions for our products. I don't want to delve too much into the details of this. I think the key takeaways really are that, for certain agricultural products and fishery products, they may appear on what are called exceptions, because these are considered sensitive items like rice and beef and pork and others. However, the second important takeaway is that even for the 5 million that we export to South Korea, a lot of it is actually under, the preference scheme. So we noted 100% preference utilization rates. Well, 98, 99%, but we spoke to people in URA who said basically a lot of these exports are accompanied by certificates of preferential certificates of origin. We would have loved to understand whether there is any erosion of preference, but we could not find data, import data from South Korea. And maybe that's something that the consultants who are coming into this exercise might want to look at. If they have access to Korea customs, they could speak to them and get this data. However,
William, just something small. Can you please do full screen, please?
Oh, sorry about it. Let me just see if I can do that. Is that much better?
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Please, if there's anything, JB and the team, if there's anything you want me to do, just let me know. I'm listening in carefully. So I was talking about the two key takeaways here, that basically, again, we would have loved to understand what the erosion would be, because maybe what South Korea allows us to export to their markets is something that we don't produce, or in comparison to other export destinations, we do not really benefit from zero rates. But like I said, that would probably be better looked at from the import side. So the export potential assessment, I think these are the few key takeaways. For those without a technical background, really, the revealed comparative advantage is something that's important to understand whether we have a comparative advantage in that product in as far as our exports to the world is concerned, but in relation to the share of our exports, of our total exports as an exporting country. And whenever you see one, anything above one, that's good. Anything below one is not so good. That really simplifies the story enough for anybody to understand. So, well, I mean, the takeaway from this analysis was that our export competitiveness of coffee has been increasing from as far back as 2005, which is very good. You can see what's happening, 25 in 2013, 30 in 2015, 43 in 2018, and continuing to improve. However, absolute export volumes have remained very, very low, like we have already discussed. So fish and tobacco, not surprising, used to be competitive pre-2010, but you can see they dropped out in 2010-13, never recovered, okay? Cereals, especially maize for planting, coffee, crude vegetables are competitive commodities in 2018. So again, if somebody were to discard or disregard the history of this, this is what we find in 2018 in as far as the RCA is concerned. But then on the second table below, you can see that EAC partner states are also competing in the Korean market for the exact basket of goods. And in fact, Uganda's coffee is only more competitive than Tanzania's, but less competitive than Ethiopia and Kenya, and as far as the RC analysis is telling us. So a lot of detail is in the report, but suffice to say, it might really be important to see why other countries enjoy a certain edge in coffee. For example, what does economic diplomacy add to the competitive mix? Are there any existing trade promotion programs? Well, I mean, for Uganda now, we are just jump-starting market-linked South Korea. What are the exporters doing in as far as quality control is concerned and marketing? Is geographical indications, for example, for coffee, giving our competing states, better edge in that market. So a lot of these really would be sum total under what we call economic diplomacy. And the cases that would be looked at would be Ethiopian and Kenyan coffee and maybe Ethiopian sesame seed. Okay. So we had to combine all of the RCA because the RCA doesn't tell the whole story, as you can see. We had to look at what's called the export potential indicator. And again, without going too much into the detail, the two figures in front of you tell you the ranking in as far as diversification is concerned, and also the ranking in as far as export potential is concerned. The table shows export potential. So basically the export potential for coffee is about 1.4 million. That's untapped in red. And for sesame seed, about $500,000, and then some small figures for fish, cured fish, and raw sugar cane. But in terms of ranking of diversification potential, because this is an analysis that combines the target market's demand and market access conditions to ensure that feasible products for the exporter also have favorable chances of export success. The surprising product is cane molasses from sugar refining for Uganda, and flours of fish or crustaceans. Vegetable products is number 4, cashew nuts is 5, and then we have unrefined copper at number 7. Okay, so that's in as far as the API is concerned. Now, I have skipped the issue to do with the case studies in this presentation, but they make for very interesting reading and they inform, and they are good for cross-referencing what we find in the profiling. So the profiled export sectors are those where Uganda already enjoys a comparative advantage, as reviewed by the RCA and also the PDI and EPI. And we did this to also estimate supply side constraints. So especially focusing on whether we can produce enough to export to our existing markets and also South Korea as an added market. And supplanting that with identifying key challenges and opportunities and what would be the key takeaways. So this slide doesn't show everything that we talked about in coffee, but the report shows the details. So for coffee, the sum total of this slide is that it's a good story. However, we have issues around competitively managing quality output, and yet quality is a key success factor for the South Korean market. Traded volumes could be positively impacted by minimizing, for example, policy, legal, and regulatory obstacles to trade. I mean, coffee is doing well. 4 million bags, 60 kilogram bags every year. High-end markets in that product category, let me just say that carefully, in that product category of green beans, Arabica, Robustas. And so what we need to do is to look at how to minimize the obstacles that we impose on the coffee trade, and as far as policies and legal and regulatory environment is concerned. But like I said, the story is generally good. Coffee can compete internationally, and and we can increase market share in high-end markets, for example, in the EU. Okay. By the way, the EU appears in this slide, but surprisingly, we find that South Korea is a much more complicated market than the EU. Okay. Cocoa beans. Well, cocoa is another interesting crop, but it's really stagnated for a long time in Uganda. However, like we say in the report, at least some work is being done to expand planted acreage and basically to increase productivity output. You can see from the slide that basically production in tons has never breached 30,000 per annum. Okay, so the coffee sector tells us that the main challenge really is on transportation. It's more expensive to transport from Kampala to Mombasa than it is from Mombasa to South Korea. A lot of our cocoa, by the way, is shipped to Malaysia, which is not too far away from South Korea. But then there are key challenges, and as far as production side is concerned, the cocoa sector is still poorly regulated, and this raises concerns about the exporters' capacity to meet stringent requirements in South Korea. Okay. Flower cuttings. Flowers, as we know, including those who are in this workshop, know that it's a capital-intensive business, and it relies a lot on very good cold chain, a very robust cold chain infrastructure, and very good flight connections and high-end export markets. But what we discover from the assessment, from the profile, is that a very small portion of flower exports is configured for direct flower markets. So we do not export our flowers to direct markets. We export to Aalsmeer, and then from Aalsmeer, the auction is done, and then flowers are transported to different destinations across Europe and other parts of the world. But we see that logistics costs seem to explain the reluctance to diversify. So, and you can see that we pay a much higher, comparably much higher freight rate per kilogram for flowers than our competing peers. For example, Ethiopia, exporters are paying maybe $1.90, Kenya about $1, and you can see how much we are paying in comparative terms. And so something we also discovered is that, due to recent lockdowns and, the pandemic related shocks, you can see that, flowers really ground almost to a halt. So transport shocks tend to affect the sector much more than they do the others. Now, one small good part of the story is that at least the industry has responded to Asia, and they've learned how to offset transport and cold chain related vulnerabilities. And the way they do this is they export flower cuttings as opposed to the blossoms, because cuttings are less vulnerable to poor handling and perishability. So this, we think, is an exciting prospect, and they are still able to get money from the cuttings. In fact, the buyers in South Korea buy these cuttings and then they cultivate them and basically create, produce the bulbs which they sell on the local market. For sesame seed, it's a mixed story there. The important thing we discovered is that basically poor quality management systems are the biggest. It's 11 hours. They're the biggest bottleneck for this sector. We've had stories of, threats to ban Uganda sesame seed certain high-end markets, and that's a key indicator of how poorly we manage quality. That in turn could be related to inadequate farmer organization, and that has many other secondary effects. For example, it's more difficult to access finance to grow sesame. However, despite all of our problems, it's still a very highly demanded product. In fact, in South Korea, sesame is a staple, okay? And so this is an interesting sector to look at. Dry beans, very, very interesting. However, we couldn't come to terms with the story being told around beans here. But, we know that if we were to actually try position an offer with South Korea, we could succeed, conditional on the fact that we have to improve bean varieties. At least there's some research going on in as far as diversifying bean varieties is concerned. Jay Fortune, the company we spoke to, confirmed our suspicions that, variation is an important factor that should be considered when looking to South Korea and as far as beans is concerned, okay? Again, beans are a staple in South Korean diet, and beans is a sector where we enjoy a clear comparative advantage. I'm talking about the graph which shows that basically there was a sharp decline, not only in area harvested, but also in production tons, in output tons. However, the yield has also been declining, as you can see. This should be interesting for people who are in the agriculture sector. So there are other potential sectors that we looked at, and we looked at spices. Actually, spices would do very, very well in South Korea. Dry bad eye chili pepper, cumin, cardamom, and coriander were singled out as really good export potential crops. Again, because they're a preference, they're basically a daily staple for South Koreans. And then gold, so I've written 3 paragraphs, but basically the story around here is that, gold has, very good potential, and it's a sector where we have very low capacity utilization. If you look at the installed capacity for refining gold. So those are the other potential sectors. Then we have a quick note on logistics. So basically, if you look at Africa in general and maybe Uganda in particular, we do not really suffer too much in as far as proximity is concerned to Asia. In fact, from what we could see, we spoke to logistics companies, the big shipping companies. East Africa, enjoys a marginally better cost competitive position to access Asia when you compare us to West Africa and South America, for example. However, what is interesting also is that, for example, the US, which is a major shipper to South Korea, enjoys much cheaper rates, shipping rates. And we will show the indicative shipping rates from the US, for example, to the seaport of Busan, and compared to what it costs us to ship and how long it takes us to ship, from Mombasa to Busan. So, well, again, a mixed story here, but the cost of shipping by sea isn't too expensive. And the sea route is, again, well configured only for transportation of bulk commodities, for example, coffee and kidney beans. So the only complaint we had around logistics was actually inland. It was to do with the cost and time taken to ship from Kampala to Mombasa than it is to ship from Mombasa to Busan, for example. Well, I don't know whether it's fully in our control to manipulate or to influence shipping rates, but that's a discussion that we need to have in depth. So now let's go to the opportunity mapping, sorry. South Korea, we didn't do so much research in South Korea, but we did some interviews, like I said, and we spoke to the foreign service officers, we spoke to the Korean embassy, and we also did some research. And basically it's a densely populated country. That's the population of South Korea. And you can see that about 20% of the people live in Seoul. The country is a highly educated population, and they're increasingly demanding high quality products with excellent health and nutritional benefits. We singled this out to show that basically food processing is a big forte in the country. And look at the size of the retail sector alone in South Korea, about 95 billion in 2018. Okay. But what stands out is that the US is the biggest exporter to this market. Okay, and that's because they have KORUS, the trade agreement with the US. But what is also interesting is that even US exporters complain about the costs of labeling, the costs of documentation and inspection. They actually report that those can be very prohibitive, okay? And imported products are subject to complicated labeling and food safety standards. Just as a case in point, you should label your products in Korean and maybe use nutrient reference values provided by South Korean authorities. And we counted there are over 33 different nutrients, each with an associated value, for example. So you can imagine sending a product that's packaged to the country, it would have to jump extremely many hoops to get into the South Korean supermarket shelf. So with that small backdrop, We conducted a cage analysis. So cage, again, sorry to use the acronym without explaining it fully, maybe C is for cultural distance. And when we measure the cultural distance, we're talking about the differences in culture between South Korea, Republic of Korea, and Uganda. And the difference is big, okay? It could explain why we do not trade also with the Republic of Korea as much. However, from a cultural distance perspective, gold, sesame seed, and spices stand out as products that Uganda produces in abundance that could benefit from social and cultural preferences of South Korea. Well, gold is an important cultural symbol in South Korea, parties and birthday parties and occasions and other, entertainment occasions and social, occasions. Gold is handed out as a gift. Okay, gold necklaces and other ornaments are handed out as gifts. Sesame seed, like we said, is a key staple. Spices, especially bird's eye chili. The South Koreans say that they like Ugandan chili because it grows wild, and it's organic, and it features a lot. So, bird eye chili features a lot in the diet. South Koreans do not prefer freshwater fish, so it isn't as stable. They have a very strong preference for seawater fish, which Uganda doesn't produce, and that is sort of validated by what we discovered earlier on, the sharp drop of exports of fish to South Korea from Uganda, because we mainly export freshwater fish. So the key takeaways is that the linguistic barriers between the two countries are considerable. However, they may not have a significant impact on tradability. Could find ways working around this barrier. And then, like we said, we have products that we can export that enjoy a strong preference in as far as cultural norms are concerned in South Korea. The administrative distance really is about the differences in governmental law, policies, and institutions, including international relations between Uganda and South Korea. So those differences we're seeing they're quite pronounced. For example, we do not share a common currency with South Korea. Okay, well, at least our export receipts are in US dollars globally, but that's a fact. And tariffs and quotas will contribute to administrative distance. However, the DF QF preferential access to South Korea, basically sort of offsets the lack of a free trade agreement. And that could in effect nullify, tariff and quota effect. But then the most important administrative distance factor is quality and standards and rules and regulations. Those are really serious and they cut across. It's not only Uganda, it's other exporting countries to South Korea. Compound that with a higher preference for domestic suppliers for certain staple products. Like we said, there's a sensitive list of products that we could produce competitively for export to South Korea. So without repeating myself, those are the key takeaways in as far as administrative distance is concerned. Now, for geographic distance, that's self-explanatory. So basically, we do not have direct flights, for example, to Seoul. And transportation of perishable products like flowers, for example, is enormously risky and obviously is ill-advised in the circumstances. It really explains why the exporters have responded by supplying flower cuttings instead of supplying, blossoms or blooms. Okay. Well, Uganda's export opportunities to offset the distance factor would probably focus more on non-perishable products. And clearly you can see coffee, dried beans, processed spices like chilies. Those will actually survive, over long land routes and long sea routes all the way up to the seaport of Busan. Fish, flowers, and fruits and vegetables, I should add here, would really be much more complicated. Okay. And then economic distance is about the differences really in income per capita. So, and what exporters do is they are usually exploiting those differences because South Koreans earn much more per capita than Ugandans earn, So the economic distance is quite big, and that is a very good thing because it produces, some really good opportunities, excellent opportunities for economic arbitrage. That's the exploitation of the differences in cost and price compared to Uganda. Well, of course, this is a complex topic to introduce, but basically there are instances where we may need to invest in South Korea in order to enjoy better proximity to that market. Okay, but then that strategy is not entirely feasible because South Korea would have comparably higher labor costs, and also the environment of doing business in South Korea is much more complex. However, Ugandans can export products to that market and earn remarkably handsome returns. Even for flowers, when we spoke to the flower exporter, they said they have no problem with return on every kilo shipped of flower cuttings to the market. Okay, we just put pictures that were sent to us courtesy of the Foreign Service Officer of the indicative price of a unit of a particular product. For example, $7 US for an orange in South Korean supermarkets. US $70 for a 50-pack coffee. $2 for an avocado. So basically, again, these indicators, look nice. They're interesting from an economic arbitrage perspective, but basically, it's not the entire story because we know that there are other factors that contribute to these high prices. So in a nutshell, this is the summary of the assessment findings. After doing the RCA, doing the sector profiling, the EPI and PDI, and all the others, the sectors that we think should be prioritized are coffee. You can see, and we have a ranking by traders because we spoke to the Uganda South Korean Business Association. Cocoa is an excellent crop to look at, highly export oriented and has diversification potential. Cut flowers, yes, we score it as a 2 there. Sesame seed as a 2, spices as a 3, on account of strong cultural significance in South Korea, and then gold, the same story. Okay. Now for the strategies, we used something called the AAA framework because basically our export basket in Uganda has mainly focused on arbitrage. So we produce, we grow a crop, we load it into trucks, we put it in sacks, ship it to the next country, and we get paid because of the price differences. However, we need to introduce other strategies that are not entirely exporting strategies, but they really assist in helping Uganda to position a competitive global offer. So, and we explain what those strategies are. So like basically adaptation is about trying to increase revenues and market share, by looking at our business model to suit the local requirements in South Korea and their preferences. Whereas aggregation is about focusing more on how to achieve economies of scale and scope, and then arbitrage is something that we are much more familiar with. But we could also locate supply chain in different locations globally. So we go into each of the product sectors in the report and we give a quick summary of what the strategies are and what the validation would be. So for example, for coffee, we know that we are competing against the US, Brazil, Colombia, Vietnam, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Italy. In the roasted segment, it's mainly from the EU and the US. And the context basically is that, for example, Vietnamese Robusta are quite popular in South Korea. However, you know that we are actually gaining an edge in as far as, the fine Robustas are concerned. But we could consider both adaptation, which is really variation in product. So let's not complicate the story too much, the technical terms. Adaptation is about diversifying or trying to change product, how you package it, the color of the packaging, the labeling, and things like that, together with aggregation, okay? And so, and we are saying here that there should be a strong product focus. So for example, high quality single origin coffee should be the focus for South Korea, but it needs to be supported by market research studies to validate adaptation and aggregation strategies in view of the competition dynamics in South Korea, okay? For roasted coffee, same story in terms of, and as far as validation is concerned, but a product focus on high quality single origin, but maybe focusing more on small roasteries for blending for local preferences. The surprising story when we spoke to, I think, Chanzo Coffee, I don't know whether they're in this workshop, but basically the way the importers in South Korea treat coffee is amazing, just to say the least. They try to adapt the climatic conditions of the coffee of the origin. So if they import it from Umbale, they try to actually recreate the altitude, the climatic conditions of Bali in order to maintain the aroma, maintain the characteristics that they prefer from that coffee. And here, you can only succeed if you have a strategic alliance between South Korean importers and Ugandan exporters, if you want to succeed in as far as the high-end, medium to high-end segment is concerned. Okay. For cocoa, again, we have a good endowment of cocoa. It's not specialty cocoa, but it's described as rich and chocolatey, and all those other characteristics that we found. Low in astringency and bitterness. It's just a good bean to roast and eat. And Ugandan beans are favored for high quality milk chocolate. So there is scope for adaptation and arbitration, but we have to be careful because we know that Ghana is a dominant supplier, and the South Korean chocolate market is highly, highly competitive. The preferences are for Europe and American brands and flavors. Okay, top that up with Chorus FTA, and basically you realize that it's a very big uphill battle. But we need to do more market research to support market discovery. Basically introduce Uganda's cocoa and its benefits that are not fully known to the South Korean markets. Okay. For cut flowers, I think here the story was a little bit less complicated. Flower companies can continue to adapt product specification to meet preferences of South Korean consumers. So basically it's about manipulating the flower cuttings and making sure that the importers are interested in continuing to buy those cuttings, because when they grow them, these are the preferred flowers on the local flower market. Like we said, the risk is significant in as far as shipping perishable flowers to South Korea is concerned. But yeah, there could be some diversion prospects, especially given the attractive ornamental segment, particularly in the capital of South Korea. Okay. For dry beans, this was very, very interesting. When we spoke to the company that ships beans to South Korea, they told us a story of how they've had to adapt, a specific bean variety to match a specific market. They spoke about Turkey, for example, but the same story applies for South Korea. And so adaptation must be a strong focus. And we need to do more research in the South Korean market to identify what is the niche bean and which are the consumer segments that prefer what type of beans, in order for us to grow the right type of beans. Okay. Well, I mean, we outproduce South Korean as far as beans are concerned. They have, but what's interesting is that they have a similar, if not higher, productivity output, against the lower planted acreage. So, and China and the US really can essentially outgrow us, outsupply us in the market, which is why basically we need to focus more on adaptation. Sesame seed. Here, I think aggregation is the most important strategy. We just need to focus on scale and scope and make sure that we coordinate export management much better. Here we saw some scope for public-private activity, but let's also be aware of the context that China is still buying a lot of our sesame seed, but it's also a big exporter of sesame to South Korea. So we need to understand better the prospects for sesame seed, especially consumer segments, what intermediate segments can buy sesame of what type, especially in the confectionery and food processing segments like we showed. Those are really huge in South Korea. And securing medium to long-term supply contracts for sesame would be very good commercially in as far as Uganda is concerned. So now how do we translate this? This is the last slide. Into opportunities. So the part of the study we call opportunity planning. So we need to have a dual-pronged approach on export management development and also economic diplomacy. And so under export management development, the focus should be on standards and quality management and product development. And here, for example, on standards, we speak to the collaborations that need to be implemented between public sector agencies like the Ministry of Agriculture, NADS, the Ministry of Trade, UNBS, Uganda Coffee Development Authority, and of course UEPB, collaborating together with private sector associations and BDS providers, business development service providers. It's very key, and here we think that one activity would be to design a project and then commence project implementation somewhere in the fourth quarter of next year. For product development, again, we need collaboration between public sector agencies. We've listed them there, including the National Agricultural Research Organization and the Uganda Industrial Research Institute. These are very key agencies to work with, but then the focus of those agencies should be also to enjoy access to skills that they do not have respectively in those agencies. So we're talking about skills in South Korea that understand product design, that can assist these agencies in product prototyping, for example, experimenting with different packaging technologies, and also perfecting the production and manufacturing processes for food in order to meet the highly stringent, highly exacting requirements of the South Korean market. So again, we didn't put indicators for when to do project design, but we're thinking that maybe project design should start in second quarter of 2021, and then fourth quarter of 2021, we can do project implementation, okay? For economic diplomacy, it's important to establish an embassy in South Korea. When we spoke to the Foreign Affairs Ministry, they said that they had planned to do this, but then COVID struck. And so they pushed the implementation to the first quarter of 2021. We are saying that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has already established the plan, but they were delayed by COVID. And then activation of commercial attaché functions is really critical, because a lot of this information needs to flow uninterrupted. It should be high quality, timely information that flows uninterrupted back to Ugandan exporters in order for them to reconfigure their offer, and also organizing in-market support missions, organizing B2Bs, organizing a lot of in-market activities. That's the job of the commercial attaché and the commercial diplomat, okay? And then the market development project, which I'm glad JB had already spoken about. Basically, that focuses on ensuring that those channels for supply and business relationships are established, okay, between Ugandan exporters and Korean importers. So in a nutshell, this is what the export potential assessment finds. And I'm glad that I'm here to take any questions and comments from you, the participants. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, William, for that. It was really an informative presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite you for questions for the Q&A session. If anybody has a question, please raise your hand and then we shall speak, we shall let you speak. So do we have any questions, comments at this point in time? Hello, are we all there? Do we have any questions?
John, this is Peter Underwood in Korea. I have a question. First of all, William, thank you very much for that presentation and your research. It's been very helpful. It's interesting to see how well you've understood the Korean market and the demands of the Korean market. I have one comment or question about export competitiveness. I see you did a very, very good analysis, and it's interesting. But at the same time, when you approach a Korean importer and are trying to promote a product, telling him that our competitiveness is 43.62 doesn't resonate very much with an importer. He's interested in things like aroma or taste or workability, long life, consistency of the product, nutritional content, and so forth. So have we been able to get any analysis of Uganda products and their quality in terms of the product characteristics rather than just a competitive number? I think that that would be extremely useful when our exporters are approaching potential importers in Korea, that they can present this kind of information. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter, for that. Do we have another question? Okay, so William, maybe you can respond to that as we wait for other colleagues to come in.
No, thank you so much for the observation. We according to the TORs, we were required to basically look at the export potential, and the revealed comparative advantage, I agree, doesn't really tell the story that may be key for accessing high-end, accessing markets. So speaking to potential purchasing managers in other markets, they don't really care whether your RCA is 43.62 or 0.25. But then what you just spoke to is actually at the heart of what's not working too well in many of the export sectors of Uganda. However, I have to be careful with that statement because the selling proposition for key staples like coffee are also very well known. If it's about cupping the coffee, for example, it's about the variety, the single origin of the coffee. Like we said for cocoa, the astringency. A lot of these technical details of the product mix for Uganda are available, but they are also kept at company level. So the exporters use these as their own, competitive edge to find buyers and basically to try and configure a mix for the specific requirements and needs of the target buyer. Well, that said, a lot of the sector profiling that is done in Uganda doesn't really go in depth and in the detail that is required, especially for buyers like South Koreans. The three case studies that we spoke to were very, very revealing when it comes to the level of detail that's required in as far as the product is concerned. The variety of the kidney bean that is needed in South Korea is different. Okay, and we need to know why. We need to know, is it the cooking time that is important for the South Korean consumer? Is it only the taste and the aroma? So again, those are the limitations in as far as exporters are concerned, because they bulk these products. Maybe they've scored highly on the variety. Maybe they've been able to consistently hit the right texture and color. But then beyond that, we do not know much. Let me just use the word we, as Ugandan exporters, would not know much about the final consumer. And so in the short answer to your question, Peter, is that there aren't very many detailed studies that provide the level of detail that's required, especially for South Korea. And the explanation, like I said, is because we focused more on the bulk segment. And secondly, companies that have this information keep it to themselves. They really do not share it as much as they should. Well, I guess they shouldn't be sharing it, because then if they do, they feel like they will lose, the edge, the competitive edge in the target market.
Okay, William, thank you very much. I see two questions in the chat. William, there is a question on prospects for Hasovacado in South Korea. I think this is something, I don't know if we spoke about it a bit during our discussions, Hasovacado. And then there's a second question. how can we better prepare for this market, especially in terms of quality standards? This is from somebody in the fruits and vegetable sector. So William, please.
Yeah, well, JB, I have to be honest, maybe, you know, avocado didn't really appear. Avocado in specific terms and, you know, fruits and vegetables in general were not attractive for reasons we explained, including geographical distance and also the complexity of the supply chain that's required to basically satisfy, you know, quality requirements. So, you know, if you ship an avocado to South Korea, how long will it, you know, stay fit for purpose, fit for consumption? Okay, in what condition will it appear when it arrives in the market? So the price looks interesting. I mean, if it's $2 per avocado in South Korea, I mean, that sounds interesting, but you know, the complexity, the supply chain complexity required for that is, if you ask me, really a little bit, you know, it's a put off for potential exporters. And then the second question you said, JB, was about how to meet quality, you know, requirements. Hello?
How to meet quality requirements. And I think that is in relation to fruits and vegetables still, because I think the person asking is from that sector.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, sorry, she's correcting. Standards for dry chili. Dry bird's eye chili, I think that's what she's referring to.
Yeah, well, we spoke to Jay Fortune about dry, you know, bird's eye chili. Look, the usual SPS requirements, you know, food safety standards requirements are sufficient for exporting bird's eye chili to South Korea. However, just don't forget the caveat we put that basically the requirements to meet very strict, you know, standards in South Korea are not something you can wish away. So my suggestion would be two things. The first would be to work with a South Korean importer to basically, you know, work together to communicate the specific requirements in as far as food safety is concerned, in as far as standards is concerned. I think for product characteristics, we didn't detect much problem there. Like we said, you know, a dry bird's eye chili in Uganda is preferred in South Korea, from what the case study tells us. They know that it is grown wild, you know, for whatever that term really means in specific terms, but they say it grows wild and it has a high pungency and they like it. Okay, I think the next issue really would be a question of, you know, meeting food safety requirements and making sure that the importer can take possession of the required, you know, of chili that meets the required standard for the market. So, I mean, making sure that those required standards are met, requirements are met, food safety standards and requirements are met, is a story about how the company behaves in as far as harvesting the chili is concerned, storing it in the appropriate conditions is concerned, drying it, you know, are they using solar drying, you know, are there any contaminants in the chili? So all those are factors to address, to consider by the company that's growing the chili, harvesting it, processing it, you know, drying, quote unquote, and then packaging it appropriately to make sure that it qualifies in as far as SPS is concerned. So for dry chili, we didn't see, because those are dry rations, we didn't see much of a problem there. It's on the fresh side where we see significant challenges.
Okay, there's another question, but let me start with this. William, we observe that in other predominantly sea fish consuming markets, there are segments that are very interested in the freshwater fish. So from your study, haven't you seen anything like this even in South Korea? Any segments that you can probably tap into, especially for freshwater fish?
You know, that was a subject of discussion with the key informants in South Korea. and they just told me that to get, to find tilapia, you have to drive long distances to find it, and it's very cheap. It's not preferred. It's not a preference that ranks extremely high on the culinary list. Let me just call it that, of South Koreans. The strong preference is for sea fish. So from the discussion with the key informant, that was sort of a decisive statement to make. However, it would be good for the consultants who are coming on board to validate that, but the Foreign Service officer said, well, I would love to eat Ugandan fish, but I can't find it. But it's also very cheap. And, if you go around looking for fish, you will find sea fish preferred as opposed to freshwater fish. So I'm not discarding your question, JB. All I'm saying is we need to study the segments in South Korea to figure out who actually prefers freshwater fish as opposed to seawater fish.
Thank you very much. Now I see a question for Mr. Kwarish. Were there any niche products that emerged as opportunities for Uganda beyond the big cash crops like coffee, sesame, beans, and gold? So maybe you've answered that, but probably you just make it a little bit clear for him.
Yeah, well, to our knowledge, no, not really. In fact, that is why in the strategy proposals we make, we focus on adaptation. So if you're going to produce roasted coffee in Uganda to sell to South Korea, first of all, you're going to be very, very patient. It's going to take you years. I'm not being a messenger of doom, but the discussions we had with exporters to South Korea confirm that in no uncertain terms. A great deal of patience taken in order to understand the market and to work your way up the quality chain so that you can meet those stringent requirements, okay? The requirements are not only stringent for Ugandan exporters, they are stringent across the board, including American exporters who are sophisticated exporting countries also consistently raise concerns around Korea's stringent quality and food standard requirements. Okay, so the short answer is that we didn't see much beyond trying to maybe venture into the medium and high-end segment of the value-added products of the staples that we can ship to South Korea. But that story isn't complete because then we need to put in the work to make sure that we can meet all of those requirements for that market. Okay, so the answer is no, beyond, because our job was to find priority products and then also indicate whether there is potential for, either growing the quantities and volumes and values going into the market, or looking at whether there is any value addition potential that can be explored over the medium to long term for that market, which I think is where Uganda wants to be in the medium to long term.
Okay, thank you, William, for that. Do we have any other questions? Okay, so going forward, we shall share the detailed report on the emails you've registered with so that you can take a look at the other information that William has not been able to present here, the detail to what he has presented. So it's there in the report, so we shall share it with you. Then we shall request that at least you take time, at least a week or so, to look at it, and then give us any other comments before we really conclude the study. I see a hand, Godfrey. Please go ahead. Godfrey Bogere, please go ahead. Hello?
I have no further questions. This is Peter.
Okay, no, sorry, there is Godfrey. I see a hand up from Godfrey. Okay, I don't know. Mr. Lawin, are you also putting your hand up? Please unmute and go ahead.
Yeah, thank you to everyone. My question goes to you people there, especially the organizer for this project. You remember last year at around this time, we go to China, the same kind of trade expo, and I personally happened to be one of the participants. When we reached there, things was very good. Everything was okay. We got a lot of contacts from the Chinese partners. The only that we faced when we came back, by the time now we were now communicating back, very few of them were able to communicate because of the language barrier. And then also secondly, by the time we were like trying to organize for sample to be sent to China, our sample kept on stopping at the custom border point. What other mechanical measures are you going to put for these Korean people in terms of the Uganda, the bilateral trade, language, and everything to make sure that they're able to succeed in this?
Okay, thank you. Okay, Godfrey, are you with us? I see your mic is still. You had a question? Godfrey, please go ahead. Godfrey Bogere.
Yeah, my question was, is there deliberate effort in the project design for the Uganda exporters to meet these importers, or at least have their directories? Is it clear?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's clear. Thank you. So I'll answer the two questions. Maybe William, you can come in in case you see anything that you can add to this. One, I'll start with Bosco's question. Of course, there is always a language issue. And then there's also problems when you're just starting out to trade with a market like South Korea, where there are language differences. Now, as part of this project, and why one of the reasons we're working with IRC is to see how we smoothen this out, especially when we are starting. And one of the key components is once we've done the B2B linkages, we expect the consultants to support the companies make that initial contact. Then we also have a phase for the market testing. At that point in time, that's when we shall be sending out the samples, and then we shall be working closely with the authorities to make sure that this is smooth. So Bosco, yes, we do understand those challenges. So that's why we have talked to the consultant we shall be working with, and they will be assisting us, especially in that initial period, until the business connections stabilize. Mr. Bogere, yes, there are efforts for the exporters to meet the importers. And as I said, we shall be having a sales mission at some point in time. That is after the studies. Now, remember, everything is being informed by the study. How we do the sales mission, how we do the B2Bs, all that will be informed by the studies that we shall be doing. So what we'll do is after the studies and after we prepared the companies, done the market trials, so we shall have a session where Ugandan exporters will be going to meet the potential buyers or the importers in Korea. So yes, that is planned for under the project. I hope I answer those two questions well. Then I say a question from Mr. Praksan. I think further to your answer to the question on freshwater fish products, I feel Nile perch is being a product from East Africa and Uganda being prominent. We should further go deep to get this product also as a niche product for export into South Korea. So William, I think, I don't know if you've seen that comment from Mr. Prakasan. I don't know what you have to say about that.
Yes, I have. And this is where, from our study, we find, like we said, without repeating myself, that freshwater fish is not really the preferred staple for fish, for seafood, or the seafood eating segment. But like I said, it would warrant more research to see if there are any niche segments that would prefer freshwater fish. I'll give you an example without dwelling too much on it. If we are selling products that enjoy a strong cultural preference because of a large diaspora in South Korea, then that's one target segment that we can focus on and say we are going to sell freshwater fish to South Korean based Ugandans or East Africans who desire to eat their food, reconnect back with their staples back home and go to a restaurant where they can find freshwater fish on the menu. Well, it doesn't mean that you don't find freshwater fish, I guess, on the menu, just like you'd come to Uganda and find seawater fish on the menu if you go to high-end restaurants. However, we're talking about a sector. We're talking about the feasibility of exporting tons of freshwater fish to that market. And, like we said, the evidence points to the contrary, that fish became less and less competitive over the decades. But if there is a niche component that we need to investigate, we can actually, I would encourage UEPB to do that under the market linked program.
Okay, thank you very much, William, for that. So ladies and gentlemen, I think that there's no further comment or question. I think it is in order for us to bring this meeting to an end. I would like to take this opportunity first and foremost to thank Mr. William for the detailed presentation and for the work so far done. I believe it will really guide us forward and ensure that the resources, the limited resources we have, are invested in the right products and then the right strategies. I would also like to thank our partners that have been able to join us, especially from UNBS and I think from Ministry of Agriculture and all other MDAs that are with us. Thank you very much, and we shall be working closely. Especially, I think we have a lot of work to do to address issues around quality and standards, and then organizing our production. Then lastly, I would also like to thank all the companies that have joined us in this meeting from the different sectors, cocoa, fish, flowers. So thank you very much. And I would like to inform you that this is just the beginning. So what we are going to do is now we are going to follow up this with an in-market study where we shall then go on the market end and then try to explore the market end aspects relating to the products that we selected. So in case there's anything else that you feel we should try and explore on the market side, please let us know in time so that we can discuss it with our consultants on the Korea side and then make sure it is included and catered for. Without any further ado, again, let me thank you all for joining us in this meeting. We shall share the presentation because I see that it's coming up in the comment section. I'll share the report and the presentation for you to look at. So thank you very much, and I wish you a lovely day, ladies and gentlemen. This is the end of our meeting.
Thank you very much, John and colleagues, and we wish you safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe, everybody.
Very much, guys. Thank you.